Richie from Lenovo. He's going to talk about energy-aware computing.
Yeah, cool, okay. 35. 35, good. Okay, good morning. So I'll talk about energy-aware computing. So I'm from HPC team. It's true, we have added AI, and so I will not talk about AI today. Anyway, you talked enough on that. So what I'll talk energy-aware computing, which is more or less how to make systems more efficient, energy efficient. So I will start first with different metrics which are used by people, and maybe I will introduce a new one. Then I'll talk about the cooling technologies, which is well known, but I'll still talk about that because it's what first as IBM and then as Lenovo, we did quite some work, and we are still doing work in this area. And then I will try to spend more time on software and to present you new things we are doing in this area. So it's true, everybody is aware, knows about PUE, okay, which computes the effectiveness about how you cool your system, okay. Total power facility divided by IT power. Ideal value is 1. It's true, it doesn't take into account how the IT power can be optimized. If you reduce the power of your server, it increases the PUE. So it's, in a way, it's the most famous metric, but it's a very inaccurate metric. At least it needs to be completed by other metrics. ITUE was introduced recently, which is more about how the power is optimized in the server, which is another aspect, of course. And therefore, you look at, for example, not only the power of the server, but everything else like VR, PSU, and fans, which I think is also a good metric because you need to reduce that. And therefore, that's the ITUE, and the ideal value is 1. And then there is a metric which is not much talked about, but I think is maybe more important than everything else, is ERE, energy reuse effectiveness. Your system are heaters. Okay, they burn a lot of power. They throw everything in the air, and nobody cares. Okay, that's a major waste. So ERE is about that. How much can you reuse? And therefore, the ideal value for this time is 0, because of course, if you can reuse everything, you're perfect. If not, another way of writing this ERE value is ERE equal PUE minus tier R used divided by IT power dissipated. And therefore, if you do no reuse, ERE equal PUE, okay? And I will show a few examples of how you can, of course, do much better than ERE equal PUE. So, and that has a huge impact, of course, on the cost you pay for electricity and for the green property of our planet. So it's true, basically you have a different type of cooling technology. For, of course, air-cooled technology. PUE is bad. ERE is, of course, equal to PUE. Then what you can do is bring water to the back of the racks, which is called rear door exchanger. You still use chilled water. PUE is best, of course, is better, okay? And that's, I would say, a solution which is very efficiently implemented in many data centers. The last is direct water cooling. You bring water to the server by itself, and then some things happen because, in fact, you can use a very high inlet water temperature because of the difference. You only need 10 degrees of delta temperature to cool a processor or a memory. So in fact, you can cool with warm water or hot water. And that's interesting because then as soon as you start using hot water, you can start thinking about reusing the energy. So PUE is usually 1.1, sometimes a little bit less, and ERE could be much less than 1 if you do hot reuse with hot water. So it's true, of course, direct water cooling is not the solution for everything, for everybody. It depends on many parameters. One of them is if you have a new data center or an existing data center. I think building today a new data center without water cooling is crazy, okay? Because you will save a lot on the chillers, and therefore the payback of direct water cooling versus rear door with a new data center is nearly instantaneous. While it's true if you have an existing data center, then unless you do energy reuse, you will pay back only by the price of electricity. And it's true, it's only when countries have a high price of electricity, then it will pay back, okay? Without energy reuse, okay? That's the simple thing. So we started direct water cooling as IBM System X, iDataPlex. We installed LRZ in 2011 with that, or 12, 9,000 nodes. It was a bit bulky because, of course, we implemented direct water cooling on an existing design server. So it was a bit rough. With the second generation, which is the Nextcale, it's been much more modular. So we have a scalable manifold. You can have a non-direct water cooled chassis in the rack. And then, of course, one of the major things is to reduce the cost, because, of course, the added cost of the water cooling can be a good reason not to install it. So we did a lot of work on reducing it. It's true with that we installed LRZ phase 1 with iDataPlex, phase 2 with Nextcale, 9,000 nodes, 3,000 nodes. We were able to save 37%, and that was measured by the customer. He saved the total power consumption over 5 years was reduced from 27 million to 17 million, which means he saved 10 million, okay? And I will go in more detail where those 10 millions are, okay? So, again, talking of, it's true, water cooling and direct water cooling has become mainstream, okay? Nearly every vendor has solutions like that. Usually it's CoolIT, okay? Which is a very simple way to do cooling. And the simple way first is because you only cool the CPU. So you don't cool anything else, and therefore you capture only 60% maximum of the heat of the system. Therefore you still need a lot of other things. While if you cool CPU, DIMMs, and VR as we do, you can get up to around 80%. And in fact, in the next generation of system, which we will launch with Skylake, we will be at 90%. So it's too, that's an important factor. Then, of course, the temperature. The goal is to do free cooling. So if you have a higher water, then you can do free cooling longer along the year. And then, of course, as we will see, if you want to do heat reuse with 35 degrees C, you will not be able to do it. And then, of course, the software, and I will talk about that. So it's true, one of the things people maybe don't know is that with a direct water cooling system, even with water at 35 or 40, you decrease the processor temperature and you decrease the consumption of the system. Because, in fact, the processor will be at a cooler temperature. And here, it's a comparison of an air-cooled system with a direct water-cooled system, where you see the temperature of the processor here and there, and you see there is a wild gap, 80 degrees for the processor air-cooled and 40 degrees with the processor. And therefore, you can benefit from it, either by reducing the power or by improving the performance. So we did these experiments with a V4 processor. We did it with V3. It was the same behavior. So if you use turbo on, if you use turbo off first, okay, that means the performance increase is very little. Then you save about 5% of power. And then if you turn turbo on, you save, you go faster by about 3%, and you still decrease the power consumption. We will be doing soon V5 experiments to see how V5 behaves, or V5 being Skylake, how it behaves. So it's true so what's where are the gains of water cooling? So of course you can use higher TDP processor. It's true with everything we talk about. Processors are getting hotter. With V3, V4, it was 165 watt. Now it's 200 watt, and we'll see processors with 300 watts and so on and so forth. So it's true. If you still want to have dense system, water cooling is a good way, or is maybe the only way, to have higher TDP processor. But except that, you gain about 10% on the node power consumption, 5% from the lower processor temperature, 4% from you get rid of the fans. So you get 10% here. You get about 25% from the cooling, and therefore you get a saving of about 35. And then from the software, you can get an additional saving between 5 and 10%, and I will talk how you can do that. So then heat reuse. So this work, in fact, was started with LRZ in Germany, which has been a very good partner. And that was the first slide they made. About what to do with hot water, because they were running their system at 45 degrees C. So it's true you could do a pool, a spa, okay. But usually data center people, yeah, it's not really the place to do that. You can green, you can do, you can grow whatever, salads or whatever. But so again, it's not a very serious solution. So what they started to do, which is very interesting, is to use adsorption chillers. So an adsorption chillers is a technology which is used since many years, which is able to produce chilled water with hot water. Originally, you needed a very high temperature water, like 90 degrees C. But with the latest technology of absorption chillers, you can start to have a very good COP, which means efficiency, with an inlet water temperature of about 50 degrees, 55 degrees C. So as soon as you have 55 degrees C outlet from the system, which means 45 inlet or 50, you can produce 60% of chilled water for nearly free, okay? And so they started that with what they call the system, which was CoolMOOC2, which is also an X-scale system, where we increase the inlet water temperature at 35 degrees C. And the ERE was measured to be 0.3, which is huge. In a way, they are able to reuse 70% of the heat produced by the system, which is a major thing. So I will skip that. And therefore, if you add the ERE to the system, you are saving about more than 50% of the energy consumed by the system. It's starting to be huge, okay? When you looked at a system which is 1 megawatt, which costs, for example, 1 million of electricity per year, if you do that, it's huge saving. And if you do TCO calculation, because of course here we talk only about, I would say, the energy saving. If you do TCO calculation, which means even if you include the capex of the for example, absorption chillers and the servers, the TCO is still positive. So, and that's why I think right now every data center which is new should use this technology. So as Lenovo, we have 18,000 nodes installed. We started in Germany. We are now starting to install system in China. It's true, China is very energy aware or green aware, and that's good, and I'm sure there will be more and more systems in China, and then we have installed systems in Malaysia, Norway, and elsewhere. So very good technology, very proven, and safe, okay? There is no leakage, everything works fine. So now, I'll talk about how to manage more software parts. So first, it's so you want to report things. So the first thing you want to report is temperature and power consumption. And then what we would like to do, and why not power consumption for the job. And then in the second step, you would like to do an optimization, okay? So, so reporting is, of course, you need to have sensors in the server. I think that's general. Usually you report two kinds of information. First, node power, AC or DC, okay? And then power inside the server. And usually it's DC power. And it's true in the, and then the accuracy will depend of the sensors and how you filter and how you treat the information. And for example, what we were doing, and that's the two software we were using as IBM. So all this information was reported to the scheduler and to the cluster manager. So, and then it's true, RAPL was introduced, which, so with, I would say, this technology where you, through the node manager, you can have, I would say, a granularity of about 1 Hertz, which is good enough for something, but if you would like to go deeper into analyzing the power consumption of an application, it's not enough. So it's true you can use RAPL to have much more finer granularity, and RAPL is able to report about frequency of 200 Hertz. The only problem being it's only reporting CPU and memory, not the node power. So if you use both, you can do something. Anyway, what we will do in the next generation of system is increase this granularity. So we are adding new sensors, and we will be, in a way, getting around this IMM, and the node manager will capture the data directly from new sensors, and we will report it. And with that, we'll be able to get information at about 100 Hertz, and with a much, I would say, better accuracy in the reading, about 3%. So what so I think so far, I don't know, but that's maybe well known by you or other people. So what I will talk now is about what we do from a software perspective. So what is very new is that as Lenovo, we are building an open HPC stack, which is not based on WRF, but on XCAT, of course. So this open stack, open source stack has many features. One of them is the GUI, which I will not talk about, which is we call it Antilles, which is a way to simply manage and submit jobs to the cluster. Then we are adding container technology through Singularity. And then one thing we are adding is this energy-aware runtime, which I will talk about now. So of course, we are extending the XCAT cluster manager to report power consumption and temperature of the nodes in the system over time. So that's useful to know if you have any hotspot in your system or not. But what I want really to dig into is at the job level, okay? Are you aware of how much power your job is consuming? How much energy this job is consuming, and what can you do about it? So it's true, now I would say scheduler like Slurm and PBS Pro can report the energy of the job, and even can change the frequency of the job. That's good, but you don't know the impact on the job. So what I started to do with IBM, in fact, was something called energy-aware scheduling, which was introduced in IBM Load Leveler and then in IBM platform LSF, was to, in a way, not change the frequency, but give a goal to your scheduler. Do you want to improve do you want to minimize the energy of the job? or do you want your job to go faster within a certain boundary? So that was the work we started as IBM a few years ago, and in fact, which has been in production at LRZ with load leveler and at SFTC with platform LSF. It was a kind of very static thing. So what we wanted to do is to be more dynamic, and that's why we have been working at here, Energy Aware Runtime. And this work has been done in collaboration with BSC, where BSC has brought some of the technology they have developed, which is called DPD. So what do we want to do? We want to, in a way, dynamically control how an application is running while it's running and without any source modification. So, and without any a priori knowledge except for the user, okay? So, of course, you could do that manually, but it's a painful exercise. You need to run the job many times, build whatever. What we want to do is to make it totally transparent. So, I was looking if there was a, yeah. So how is it built? So there are 3 phases in here. One is a learning phase, and we don't use machine learning technology, okay, not yet. What do we do here is understanding the behavior of each node in the system. By behavior, I mean how many watts, for example, this node is consuming, what's the impact, what's the temperature of the processor. All this kind of thing which will impact, for example, if you run a job at a given frequency, it will impact the power consumption. If you use turbo, the frequency raised by turbo will depend on the processor temperature. So we are, through simple kernels which are launched in the system, we built a database for each node of how each node is, I would say, the characterization of each node. So that is, and of course the user is not aware of that. So that's one for all, or every time you will do a system change. So for the user, that's this part. The user submits his job as usual. And then DPD, which is the technology which has been developed by BSC, will detect the loops inside the job. Because the assumption is that every scientific program has a loop somewhere, okay? It can be over time, it can be over space, but usually they are loops. So what we want to do is detect the loops, so first, and then try to find out the outer loop to start controlling at this stage. Okay, of course, then you could do at smaller level, but first start at this stage. So the first thing is to detect the outer loop, then do what we call application characterization, and what we call also compute the application signature, which means collect a few metrics which we believe characterize the power consumption and the performance of an application. And those parameters are simple because they need to be computed quickly. So it's CPI, GBS, of course, power and time. So we collect that let's say the first iteration DPD works, and then second iteration we start computing the metric if I want to be very high level, and third iteration we'll apply this this information and that one, okay, through a power and performance model. So we are able to predict while the application is running, what would be the behavior of this loop if we were changing the frequency regarding performance and power and energy. And therefore, based on an energy policy which is defined by the system admin or the user, take an action. But this action is not static, okay? Because while the job is running, every, let's say, n iteration will reevaluate the application signature to see if the application has change of behavior over time, because it could happen. Okay, you start doing something and then you do something else. If we find out that this application signature is changed, then we go back to the DPD. We try to refine again what's the loops and so on and so forth, and we reapply all the control and energy policy. So that's the technology we are developing, and it's now being, I would say, benchmarked on real application. So learning phase. So we have a simple power and time model, and we have coefficients A, B, C, D, and F, which represents the node, and then we collect the application signature, which is CPI GBS, and then we mix the two to compute the prediction. So based on that, we'll predict if the application is running at frequency F whatever, F0, then we'll do a prediction at any available frequency Fn, such that then we can make a decision. DPD, so I think I already talked about that. So we do dynamic pattern recognition, we compute the signature, we do the performance power projections, we apply the policy, and we apply the optimal frequency. And then if the signature was changing, then we would start again. So DPD is in fact based on, it tracks MPI calls, and that's the repetition and the types of MPI calls. And it's the repetition of this MPI call which will help DPD determine which are the loops. And in fact, so here is a very simple example where you start, I would say, in a way, recording the events. And then, for example, and then you see here that there is a repetition of 1, 2, 3. So you say, OK, it's a new loop. Then 1, 2, 3, it's the new loop. So we have found a loop, OK? That's the end of the loop. But then, over time, we find out that there is another loop. And it's another repetition, which is here. And therefore, we'll determine that this is the outer loop, which we need to work on, okay? So of course, it can be, so you need to track a lot of MPI calls. It can have some overrides, and that's why we will not do it. I will show a little bit how much override it has. So that's why we will not do it, of course, at every iteration. But it's pretty accurate, and BSC has done a lot of work. And right now, they are, in fact, optimizing this DPD algorithm to be able to capture outer loops, which are much more complex. So we took a few examples of applications. One of them is BQCD, which is a quantum chromodynamics application. And we like it, first, because it's a real application, and second, depending on the parameters of this application, you can turn it to be CPU bound or memory bound. In fact, it's an application. If you run it on a small number of nodes, it's memory bound. And then, of course, if you increase the number of nodes, the problem size is reducing, and it's becoming a CPU bound application. So we like, and we took it because, of course, what we want to stress is the behavior of here on the two extreme case, which is memory bound and CPU bound. So anyway, on this BQCD and on any application, it will work the same way. First step is to detect the big loop, okay? Second is to apply the policy and to change the frequency. Third, of course, is to measure that the power has been reduced if that's what we want to do. And third is to detect again that the iteration is not changing. So we started with two policies, and in fact, those policies were originally developed with LRZ in Germany. minimize energy to solution and minimize time to solution. So, and of course, they have opposite behavior. One is minimize energy to solution, but of course it's simple, but you don't want to lose performance. So the only thing that is, the only parameter which is asked is the maximum performance penalty. So you decide, okay, I want to minimize energy, but I don't want to lose more than whatever percent. And minimize times to solution is the other way around. I want my application to go faster, sure, but sometimes it's useless. So usually it means I want to increase the frequency, but usually it's useless, okay? And in fact, in your talk about training, it seems, yeah, applications are memory bound. Well, that's the typical example where you don't need to run faster. In fact, you should run slower. So the good thing is that, again, so you apply this policy, and the only thing you ask is, what is, I want at least a give back in a way, which is minimum performance efficiency gain. I want my application to scale by frequency at least as 60 or 70%. So that's the only thing you ask. So okay, that's nice. So how does it work? Is it real? First, what we did was to verify the model of power and time prediction, and with so BQCD, MEM, BQCD, CPU, and we are now doing more, but for sake of time, I'm just presenting those two ones. And on these lines, so we see the 2.3 was the nominal frequency, and then we looked up to 1.8, and the blue curve is the real, and the red is the projected. So it's it's pretty close, okay? And on average, it's about 5% error, which is not much. So then, it's true, we took BQCD, the two cases, CPU and intensive, and manually changed the frequency to see what was happening, okay? So it's true, if you, CPU intensive, if you decrease the frequency from 2.3 to 1.8, what we see is the power saving is important, but the performance degradation also, which is the classic example of a CPU-bound application. And of course, you gain very little in this kind of thing. While for the memory intensive, of course, the big difference is the power saving is less, of course, because the CPU is less utilized, and the CPU is usually the most power consumption part of the server, but the performance degradation is little. So that means you can decrease seriously frequency without hurting much the performance. So that's what somebody manually could do, okay? But what we want to do is to do it automatically. So here we have the example of applying those policies with here. So you set the threshold, and we took the example of 5, 10, and 15%. I forgot to say that, or I said it, but quickly. We compute the behavior of each node, which means each node could take the same policy, could be applied, could give different results on each node because each node is behaving differently. And that's what we see here. For example, for a use case, 5%, so what we want to do is minimize energy, which means I want to decrease the clock. Then he picked up two different clocks depending on the nodes because the nodes were different. And therefore, for 5% performance degradation, he picked up the 2.2 and the 2.3. For 10%, he picked up the 2.2. For the memory case, it's great. He selected by itself 1.8. So minimize time to solution is the other way around. So here, for now, we start from a lower frequency, okay? We will then investigate how to use turbo, but for now we are not using turbo. So we start from a default frequency of 2.0. We want to minimize the time to solution, and it's true. If you take the CPU bound application, you select a threshold, he reaches exactly 2.3, at least for some of the nodes. And then for the memory band, he doesn't change anything because he finds that it's useless to increase the frequency because the application will not go faster. So let me, so it's we talked about the accuracy, about DPD, so there is a lot of work going on to optimize the cost of that. For now, it's 2 microseconds per event. And it's true, you have some applications which have huge MPI calls. So it's true, for example, we found applications which have 16 million MPI calls. So you need to tune that. So that's a work which is going on right now. But it has been already. So where are we? I think the goal by itself is reached. Okay, we have built this infrastructure which is transparent, no source modification, dynamic. It's supporting open standard programming models. Using standard library, yeah. So there is no real standard to measure, for example, hardware counters. PAPI, for example, does not support the on-core counters on V4, okay? So you can. So there are you still need to do some handwork, but hopefully things will change. And then it's true, what we want to do now is minimize the overhead. So conclusion. So it's true, as Lenovo, we have been working since years on all aspects of energy-aware computing, hardware aspects, CapEx, OpEx, TCO, energy reuse, and now adding, I would say, dynamic approach to control the application. And if you come to ISC next week, you will have the chance to see a real demo of here with Barcelona on the site, okay? Of course, you will see an AI demo because I think nobody can talk about HPC without AI today, so it's good. Then we'll show also direct water cooling hardware. We'll show also a demo of our open HPC stack and even things around NVMe drives with file systems which are in fact faster than GPFS, which is Accelero, so we'll do a demo of that. So I think that's right on time.
Thank you so much. Questions? Thank you.
Very nice presentation. One comment, I'm really glad you're using Singularity containers. That's a big step forward, I think, for the HPC community. I also very much like what you're doing on the energy efficient runtime. One thing you didn't mention in your multi-node run, tightly coupled computations can be very strongly affected by jitter. Essentially, the slowest node in the group dictates the runtime, and you can actually get a 4x slowdown. You didn't make any comments on jitter or...
Yeah, it's true, I didn't. And in fact, that could be another policy. In fact, it's true, you could, I agree, that's a problem. So with collecting the information we have, again, we could decide at next iteration to adjust the frequency of each node to make sure that the fastest node is not too fast or the slowest node is not too slow. That's, yeah, we are thinking to do that, yes. And it's true, Singularity, I think, in fact, we have, it could be another talk, but we are now comparing Docker with Singularity. And it's amazing how Singularity is much better than Docker.
It really is.
Yeah.
More people in the room using Singularity? Yeah, kind of.
So I believe, really, with Singularity, we will maybe get rid of, I would say, the very rigid HPC systems we have today. And because on the measurements we have done, it's nearly no override compared to a bare metal system. So I think that will be the next step in HPC.
So probably off topic, you mentioned, I think, in one of the slides regarding the web interface for the users, to submit jobs to the batch queue system. do you know anything else about this project? So, well, it's
So
already
what
available. It's already published.
It's already?
It's already available.
So we are finishing it. So we will make it available as open source as a runtime. Then what we want to do is to build, to first to have a plugin for Slurm, such that it will complement what Slurm is doing. So Slurm is only reporting the energy. So all the features, I would say, you could have it through Slurm. So that's the next step we'll do. Build plugins for schedulers. It could be Slurm, it could be PBS Pro, it could be any scheduler. It's also, that's why we did it as a runtime, not only to be dynamic, but to be usable by any scheduler.
That's good. Well, so thank you so much, Luigi.
Thank you.